Change today. Inspiring daily life. We create tomorrow. Inspired by innovation. Change today. Create tomorrow. Lotte.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be selected at random to receive special gifts. 2025 Arirang Overseas TV Viewer Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
In our headlines on this Wednesday, August 20th, here in South Korea. The presidential office says its proactive peace efforts are to ensure stability for both Seoul and Pyongyang and not intended to appease anyone. The remarks follow fresh rebuke by North Korea regarding peace on the Korean peninsula. Meanwhile, 50% US tariffs on steel and aluminium have been expanded to include over 400 additional product types that economists warn may further strain the American supply chain and raise costs for consumers. And today, Arirang TV is hosting President Kim Yo-jong and the director of KPop Demon Hunters, Maggie Kang, among others, for a chat on the next chapter of the K-pop industry. South Korea's top office says its peace overtures toward North Korea seek stability for both Seoul and Pyongyang. The clarification follows the regime's latest condemnation of the president's efforts to revive cross-border engagement. Our Moon Hye-ryun reports.
South Korea's presidential office has responded to North Korea's criticism of its efforts to restore inter-Korean trust, stating that the administration's proactive measures for peace are not intended to appease anyone. On Wednesday, the top office emphasized that the government will leave behind the era of hostility and confrontation and open a new era of peaceful coexistence and shared growth on the Korean peninsula. The Ministry of Unification added that mutual respect between the South and the North is essential to building a Korean peninsula peace that benefits people on both sides. North Korea's Kim Yo-jong, the powerful sister of Kim Jong-un, had earlier launched sharp criticism against President Lee, declaring that South Korea cannot be a diplomatic counterpart to Pyongyang. According to the state-run Korean Central News Agency, Kim convened a meeting with senior foreign ministry officials on Tuesday to convey her brother's foreign policy directives. In her remarks, Kim accused the Lee administration of putting on what she called serious efforts to appear interested in improving inter-Korean ties, but claimed Seoul's confrontational intent remains unchanged. She singled out President Lee's recent comment that small acts of goodwill could rebuild trust between the two Koreas, dismissing it as delusion and a pipe dream. Kim further argued that decades of South Korea's rotten political system show that, whether under conservative or liberal governments, Seoul's stance towards the North has not changed. Kim denounced the ongoing Ulji Freedom Shield joint military exercise with the United States as a rehearsal for invasion, and highlighted a new operational plan, Plan 5022, which he claimed targets North Korea's nuclear and missile capabilities at an early stage. The plan, signed last year to replace Plan 5015, is designed to prepare the allies for potential conflict on the Korean peninsula, reflecting North Korea's more advanced nuclear and missile threats. Kim's remarks come as Pyongyang prepares to convene its Supreme People's Assembly on September 20th, where economic and legal issues are on the agenda, though the possibility of constitutional changes has not been ruled out. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
On the international front, the White House has ruled out prospects of U.S. boots on the ground as part of security guarantees for Ukraine, but left open the prospects of support in the air. Our Park Hyo-bin explains.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday, during an interview with Fox News, gave his assurance that U.S. troops will not be on the ground in Ukraine. Later, the White House doubled down on that during a briefing.
The president has definitively stated U.S. boots will not be on the ground in Ukraine.
That statement was in contrast to remarks made the previous day when he appeared to leave the option on the table during the summit with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
There'll be a lot of help. When it comes to security, there's going to be a lot of help. It's going to be good. They are first line of defense because they're there. They're Europe. But we're going to help them out also. We'll be involved.
Still, Washington indicated that air support could be considered as part of any eventual settlement to end the conflict. Trump, speaking to Fox News, said the U.S. is willing to help, especially probably through the air. The White House said that air support remains possible.
It is an option and a possibility. I won't certainly rule out anything as far as military options that the president has at his disposal. I'll let him do that. I can tell you he's definitively ruled out boots on the ground.
In addition, Trump declared that Ukraine's long-standing ambitions of joining NATO and reclaiming Crimea from Russia were impossible. Russia wants Ukraine to withdraw from Donetsk and Luhansk and to recognize Crimea as Russian territory in exchange for a possible troop pullout. Meanwhile, when U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was asked on Fox News about whether Budapest could be a possible city for the three-way talks, as had been reported, he said that it could be the case, but that the bilateral meeting between Zelensky and Putin needed to happen first. Hungary is among the few European countries Putin could visit without the risk of arrest under an International Criminal Court warrant, given Prime Minister Viktor Orban's close ties with Moscow. Alongside discussions over a potential summit venue, leaders at the Washington talks on Monday revisited the idea of establishing a Korean-style buffer zone protected by multinational troops, according to EU sources. Park Hyo-bin, Arirang News.
Also in the U.S., as we reported at the start of this week, the Trump administration has indeed expanded its 50% tariffs on steel and aluminium to include over 400 products. Our Lee Seung-jae revisits this trade reality.
The Trump administration has widened its sweeping trade agenda, expanding 50% tariffs on steel and aluminum to cover more goods. According to the U.S. Commerce Department, the new tariffs include 407 new product categories. The new levies, which took effect Monday, now extend beyond raw materials to a broad range of goods, including fire extinguishers, machinery, construction materials, and specialty chemicals. U.S. Commerce Undersecretary Jeffrey Kessler says the move shuts down avenues for circumvention and supports the revitalization of the U.S. steel and aluminum industries. However, the full list of products now facing new tariffs was released with only customs codes used to identify items, leaving companies scrambling to determine which of their goods are included. Trump has leaned heavily on sector-specific tariffs as a key tool of his trade policy. In June, he doubled the steel and aluminum tariffs to 50% for most countries, sparking concerns among U.S. trading partners. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told CNBC on Tuesday that he expects U.S. tariff revenues to rise sharply, well above his earlier estimate of $300 billion. He said that Washington intends to use the money to pay down federal debt, not to issue rebate checks to Americans. Bessent stressed that the Trump administration is laser-focused on deficit reduction, arguing that the U.S. economy could return to the good, low inflationary growth of the 1990s. However, he noted that higher interest rates are squeezing housing markets and lower-income households burdened by credit card debt, pressing the U.S. Federal Reserve to further rate cuts. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And on the trade front here, exports of automobiles in July remained resilient, rising over 8% on year, driven by demand in Asia and Europe. Our Park Chunan has the latest numbers.
Automobile exports in July rose 8.8% year-on-year to $5.83 billion, marking 2 consecutive months of growth, according to the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy. Automobile shipments to the European Union and Asia saw a prominent increase, rising 32.7% and 34.6% in value, respectively. Meanwhile, auto exports to the United States, South Korea's largest market, have fallen for 5 straight months following the Trump administration's 25% tariff imposed in April. While seeing a decrease in export value, the decline softened from 16% in June to 4.6% in July, signaling potential stabilization. Overall, the number of automobile exports rose. Over 211,000 vehicles were shipped, marking a 5.8% increase from July 2024. Notably, eco-friendly vehicles, including electric vehicles, hybrids, and plug-in hybrids, saw remarkable increases. EV exports grew 12.3% to 20,200, continuing a rebound that began in June after 16 months of declines. Hybrids surged 18.1% to around 44,000, and plug-in hybrids jumped 31.7% to 4,200, collectively boosting eco-friendly vehicle exports by 17% to over 68,000. Although automobile shipments to the U.S. declined due to the tariffs, the resolution of the auto tariff rate, finalized at 15% on July 30th, has significantly reduced trade uncertainties. The government pledged it would support the industry through financial measures, technological development, and new market exploration to sustain growth momentum. Park Chunan, Arirang News.
Earlier on Tuesday, President Kim Yo-jong hosted business leaders at his office as part of summit preparations ahead of his U.S. visit. Our correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
With the summit with U.S. President Donald Trump less than a week away, President Lee Jae-myung hosted business leaders at his office on Tuesday, including Choi Tae-won of SK Group and Lee Jae-yong of Samsung, who will be accompanying him on his trip to Washington.
The meeting was arranged to discuss ways to maximize economic outcomes at the South Korea-U.S. summit and listen to our company's investment and purchase plans in the U.S.
As the president thanked them for their role in recent trade talks with the U.S., he called for the need to work together to turn the crisis into an opportunity amid trade uncertainties to revitalize the economy. The sentiment was echoed by the business leaders.
The business leaders agreed that the upcoming trip should serve as an opportunity to help promote our businesses entering the U.S. market and further raise our industrial competitiveness.
Late last month, a framework trade deal was reached to lower the U.S. reciprocal tariffs on South Korea from 25% to 15% in exchange for investment pledges worth hundreds of billions of dollars, with many details to be worked out in time for the first Trump summit. Areas of cooperation would be centered on chips, batteries, and shipbuilding. Security is also one of the major issues, such as South Korea's defense spending and a possible change to the role and scale of U.S. troops stationed in Korea, as Washington focuses on countering China. President Lee's trip to neighboring Japan will precede his U.S. trip for talks with Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba, signaling resumption of the two neighbors' so-called shuttle diplomacy. Against this backdrop, former Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa is likely to be appointed as South Korea's ambassador to the U.S., according to sources familiar with the matter, and former ambassador to Vietnam Lee Hyuk as top envoy to Japan. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
And as we reported yesterday, our station Arirang TV today is hosting a panel discussion that includes President Kim Yo-jong and the director of KPop Demon Hunters, Maggie Kang, among others, to touch upon the next chapter of the K-pop industry. Our top office correspondent Song Yoo-jin files this report.
The driving force behind South Korea's national strength. That's how President Lee Jae-myung described Korean culture at his latest cabinet meeting on Monday, pointing to the global success of the Netflix hit K-pop Demon Hunters. The movie has become the platform's most watched animated film, while its soundtrack continues to dominate major charts, from the US Billboard to the UK's official chart. Building on that momentum, the president is set to appear on an Arirang TV special program, K-pop The Next Chapter, on Wednesday to discuss the future of the K-pop industry, the backbone of the Korean wave. He will be joined by a star-studded panel. Maggie Kang, writer and director of K-pop Demon Hunters, members Jihyo and Jonghyun of the K-pop girl group Twice, music producer RT, and culture critic Kim Young-dae. The presidential office says they'll share ideas on how to further expand K-pop's global reach and explore policy directions to support its growth. This follows the president's call to craft strategies to cement Korea's status as a cultural powerhouse.
관계부처는 지원하되 간섭하지 않는다는 8길이 원칙에 입각해서 K 콘텐츠의 글로벌 확산 전략 수립과 지원, 그리고 K-팝 등 관련 시설 인프라 확충을 포함해서 종합적인 대책을 마련해 주시기를 당부드립니다.
You can catch K-pop The Next Chapter on Arirang this Wednesday at 5 p.m. Korea time. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
And K-pop Demon Hunters is back on top of Netflix's top 10 movies list, having secured 26 million views during the week of August 11th. That is 9 weeks after its debut. In fact, during the week of August 11th to the 17th, this K-pop inspired animation topped the chart in 59 countries, including the US, Canada, Vietnam, and Taiwan. Also, as it rakes in more than 20 million views each week, pundits believe this production is looking to stand as the most watched Netflix movie. Now, Red Notice, released in 2021, is currently the most watched film, and K-pop Demon Hunter stands in second place with a total of 230.9 million views. K-pop girl group Twice has set a new record on the US Billboard chart. On Tuesday local time, Billboard announced that the group's extended plays title track, Strategy, ranked 62nd on the Hot 100 chart dated August 23rd, marking Twice's highest placement yet. Released on December 6 last year, the song is also gaining popularity on Spotify's US chart, ranking 38th on the August 17th list. Meanwhile, the original soundtrack of Netflix's animated film K-pop Demon Hunters is also making waves on the Billboard charts. On Tuesday, a total of 8 tracks, including Golden, Your Idol, and Soda Pop, entered the Hot 100. And indeed, K-pop Demon Hunters is breaking music charts, creating viral challenges, and encouraging greater global interest in broader Korean culture. Our An Sung-jin reports.
Worldwide hit, global musical sensation, potential goldmine. The craze continues for the K-pop Demon Hunters. From being Netflix's most watched animated film of all time to its Billboard topping original soundtrack, its monstrous success reflects K-pop's growing influence in the mainstream.
The songs are really nice, and I think that it opened more and more people to K-pop. Like, even my mother watched it. And I think that it's a good opportunity for Korea to open up to the world even.
Scenes with iconic K-pop idol light sticks or fan meetings put the spotlight on Korea's unique fan culture as well. But forget about the mere appeal of K-pop aesthetics. The film embeds a subtle but certain authenticity of Korean culture, offering a pathway into the expansion of Korean content for its global viewers.
I think it was, in the beginning of the movie, it was eating the ramyeon and eating the bibimbap. I think in the plane, that was very culture. I really liked it as well. Made me crave to want to eat Korean food. It's like small exposure, but a very good exposure for them to visit Korea.
Members of the girl group Huntrix all perform with their signature 놀이개, often worn with the traditional attire to symbolize good fortune and wealth. Ancient fortresses or Namsan Tower, as well as public bathhouses and Haniwon or traditional Korean medicine clinics, accurately portray the everyday life beyond the niche elements in the entertainment industry. Food like kimbap and ramyeon, as well as Korean dining customs, highlight the details, and the characters bring life to folk art paintings such as takodo.
Not only is it very well made, but it's the Korean elements that become interesting and refreshing for Western viewers. With their popularity, these films serve as culture ambassadors, often more effective than government campaigns.
What makes Korean content like the animated film so beloved is the fact that it resonates with local authenticity and intertwines tradition, modern K-pop, and everyday elements, making it relatable in and outside of the country. 안성진, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. We begin in Mexico. President Claudia Sheinbaum denied on Tuesday that Mexico has reached any new agreement with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. The DEA had earlier announced what it called the Portera Project, a major operation aimed at shutting down smuggling routes that move drugs, weapons, and money across the border. But during a press briefing, Sheinbaum stressed that no Mexican security institution has signed such an agreement with the DEA. The president, who has generally been proactive toward strengthening security ties with Washington and cracking down on drug cartels, reacted sharply to what she described as a unilateral statement made without prior consultation. In the DEA statement, its Administrator Terry Cole, who was recently appointed to head Washington, D.C.'s police force, said the new initiative will involve planning and operating side by side with Mexican partners while bringing the full weight of the U.S. government to the fight. President Donald Trump announced on Tuesday that the White House is launching a full review of the Smithsonian museums, expressing frustration over what he perceives as an excessive emphasis on the negative aspects of American history. Trump said on social media that the museums overly highlight dark parts of U.S. history, including slavery. He added that he has instructed his attorneys to conduct a review using a process similar to the one he applied to higher education institutions. The museums expected to be affected by the review include the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the National Museum of American History, and the National Museum of Natural History. The Smithsonian has declined to comment on the matter. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has criticized French President Emmanuel Macron's decision to recognize a Palestinian state. Netanyahu said the move fuels anti-Jewish sentiment in France and rewards Hamas. He described the move as strengthening hatred towards Jews and endangering their communities. Macron's office called Netanyahu's claims incorrect and emphasized France's ongoing efforts to combat anti-Semitism. Macron announced in July that France would formally recognize a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly in September. With the third and final Downton Abbey film set to hit theaters this September, fans now have the chance to own a piece of the show's history. Props and costumes from across the series are going up for charity auction. Among the items is the bell wire from the servants' hall, expected to fetch between $6,000 and $9,000. The family car, a 1925 Sunbeam, is estimated to sell for around $40,000. All auction items, including set pieces and costumes, are currently on display in central London for free. Proceeds from the auction will go to Together for Short Lives, a charity supporting children with life-limiting conditions and their families. Yoon Se-young, Arirang News.
It's late August and the heat wave shows no signs of ending, with heat wave warnings issued across the country. There were many places where the daytime temperature rose to around 35 degrees Celsius, with Samcheok and Pohang hitting 36 degrees. For the time being, the heat will continue day and night. In particular, the daytime temperature in Seoul will rise to 33 degrees on Saturday, which is Choseol on the traditional calendar, when the heat is supposed to go away and a cool autumn will begin. Tomorrow morning, Seoul, Daejeon, Gwangju, and Daegu will start off at 25 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 32 degrees in Seoul and Busan, Gyeongju 35 degrees. There will be showers in Gyeonggi-do, northern parts of Gangwon-do, Jeollanam-do, and Gyeongsangnam-do provinces tomorrow. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, during which we touch upon the Korean wave and its momentum as the broader industry seeks to start a new chapter.
Building a sustainable tomorrow. Connect, innovate, and prosper. Connecting goods to goods, region to region, people to people, generation to generation. Facilitating innovation for all, closing the digital divide. Building an inclusive technology ecosystem, promoting digital innovation by deepening dialogues on AI. Achieving shared prosperity, addressing global challenges. Energy transition, climate change, population decline, and pandemic responses. APEC-related events continuing in Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea, where diverse cultures blend. Jeju, the beautiful island, blessed with UNESCO Natural World Heritage Sites. Incheon, the vibrant international city, central hub connecting Asia Pacific. Busan, the largest maritime city, centering around maritime trade and the logistics industry. And Gyeongju, the city hosting the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting, where 2,000 years of profound history and modern, trendy, and youthful energy blend in a perfect balance. Here, a new chapter of economic exchanges will unfold for a better future.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 APEC은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 APEC 2025로 이어집니다.
On Press Perspective today, our panel of foreign pundits touch upon the momentum that the Korean wave continues to build amid the craze over K-pop Demon Hunters. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Wednesday's edition of Press Perspective. It's August 20th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. As a British daily earlier claimed, the Korean wave has made a splash across the globe. And now it's hoping and working to expand its international fan base. For more on this, I have Mariana Baroli with Italian news magazine Panorama live on the line. Mariana, welcome.
Hi, Sunny. Nice to be here. Thank you.
I also have Jason Besheves at the Office of International Affairs at Hanyang University, who is currently joining us from London. Jason, it's great to have you on.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Right. Mariana, we will start with you. So the song Golden, performed by the fictional K-pop girl group in KPop Demon Hunters, has topped both the US Billboard Hot 100 and the UK official singles chart. Let's start off, Mariana, with the significance of this success.
I think that this momentum is very historic because it rewrites the rules of global pop, not only K-pop. BTS opened the door when they hit #1, but now even when a fictional idol can beat singers like Dua Lipa or whatever, you know that K-pop is not a trend anymore. It's like future of the pop itself. And I think that seeing them on the top of the charts like Billboard or the UK official singles chart, that proves two things: that K-pop is no longer limited by geography and it has become a cultural operating system. And second, it's the emotional codes of fandoms like storytelling, aesthetic. They're so powerful now that they even present that the reality is that fans don't care if the idols are flesh and bones, if they're real, if they're with blood, or they're digital avatars. They're like wants to respond to the K-pop, and that's what matters. And so it's not just the music itself; it's what the future of K-pop is, I think.
Right. Jason, the popularity of K-pop Demon Hunters has also sparked a sellout of traditional themed merchandise at the National Museum of Korea. How do you explain this broad content consumption, if you will, among fans?
Yeah, there's a few things going on there. I mean, it is rather extraordinary. I mean, the number of visitors have doubled since last year. So there were 742,000 visitors in July, and I think a lot of that's credited to, the success of K-pop Demon Hunters and Korean culture more generally. And they're seeing visitors from elementary kids right through to adults. And this is signifying the appeal of the film. The reach that it does have, and people are watching it time and time again. I think looking at merchandise itself as well. I mean, if you look at the success of K-pop as an industry, you've got fans. I've got students, and they'll come here and they'll buy albums. Physical. They want a physical copy of something. And I think, obviously, K-pop Demon Hunters is on Netflix, and you can watch it. But often fans just want something to hold, to treasure. And I think that's what's happening with K-pop Demon Hunters. And even actually in theaters and distributors here in Korea, because cinemas have been struggling, they've been trying to kind of put together merchandise to try and lure viewers into theaters, and that's proved quite successful with the screens selling out quite quickly, and so it doesn't surprise me at all that that merchandise has taken off. This does illustrate the reach that this film has had, and Netflix being this kind of global streamer, and it's available in most countries, and it's their most popular animation. Clearly, it's massively popular, and I think the interest in merchandise reflects that. And just reading some of the articles and just hearing from some of those who've been working there, and they haven't seen anything quite like it, and we're just seeing I think a further sign of the reach of Korean culture on the global stage.
Right. And online, Mariana, social media platforms are also actively promoting viral challenges related to K-pop Demon Hunters. That being said, Mariana, what would you highlight as some of perhaps the unique aspects of the K-pop fandom?
I like to say that K-pop fandom is a cultural ecosystem, so give K-pop fans and K-pop fandoms a story and a hashtag, and they can rewrite the world, basically. I think that they're hyper-connected, hyper-creative. They function day and night, 24/7. They follow all the trends. They create merchandise. They print pictures, photo cards, whatever. They keep selling merchandise and make people able to buy from South Korea. That's powerful and gene, I think, for K-pop. And also I think that what makes it unique is how fans is able to remix the culture without losing the DNA. I like to do an example, for example, like the Italian fans. You can see a lot of influencers cooking, for example, Korean food right now, but I don't know if you've ever seen the viral tteokbokki pizza challenge, which is the Korean street food, as you know, but in an Italian tradition, and that's what's becoming viral. And that I think it's how exactly fandom works. They adapt the K culture to their own local context, but they never water it down. They produce content, translate it overnight, amplify it across borders. They share their thoughts without never fight, but to defend their right as fans. And because that, I think that they're synchronized globally thanks to social media. And when a challenge lands in Seoul, they're already trending in Milan or London or Madrid or Sao Paulo, within hours. So I think that it's a real infrastructure that works perfectly, and it's able to improve the movement, improve the wave.
Well, that's amazing, actually, Mariana. Jason, in the initial years of the Korean wave, there were concerns that its popularity may simply be a temporary phenomenon. I believe this is something we touched upon the last time you were here in the studio.
We did, yeah.
Right. Today, pundits, Jason, are claiming that the Korean wave is here to stay and continues to build momentum. That being said, where exactly does the Korean wave stand, do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll add a British flavour to that. I mean, Mariana, talked a bit about a pizza challenge there. And, I'm here in the UK and I just walk around, restaurants and, grocery stores. And there's just Korean food or Korean inspired or K-inspired everywhere. It's been quite a shock for me. I think that that's just further evidence of, how big Korean culture has become. And, I think, we talked about it on the show last time I was on there and, how far can this go and will this bubble pop, and I've been following Korean films, that's my area of expertise, for more than 2 decades now. And there's always been that thought in the back of my mind, is that bubble, going to burst? And, Korean cinema, is it just going to not disappear, but it just, won't quite have the impact that it has done previously. But it just goes from strength to strength. And I think, looking back now, I think, that it's come in different stages and, it's also developed very, very quickly, but also over, 2 decades now. And I think there's just a really strong foundation. So, if we break that down, I mean, looking at the development in the 1990s and 2000s, there was an influx of financing. That's when the studio system was developed here. And, they've been able to, make a lot of, very impressive films and shows, and they've had the money and the expertise to do that. And there's education, and so film schools, and these were initially like the KPop, the Korean Academy of Film Arts. It opened its doors I think in the 1980s, but it was in the 1990s where it was training filmmakers like a Bong Joon-ho and there's government policy as well in supporting the industry that began in the 1990s, but has gone from strength to strength later on, in 2000s, the subsequent administrations, this push towards kind of globalization. And kind of going back to what I said about stages as well, you have movies like Old Boy, and then you have The Host, and then you have films like Train to Busan, and then Parasite. It's just and now we've got KPop Demon Hunters. And so every time you think it can't go any further, it does. So I think, there's no longer a question about whether this K content or K culture this bubble is going to burst. I think now it's here to stay, and how far it can go looking ahead. And I think it can continue to go further. And each time I think it's hit the ceiling, but then surprisingly, even though that the ceiling is pretty high, they've managed to kind of raise the bar each time. So I think it's got some way to go yet.
Right, I agree with you on that, Jason, for sure. Marianne, with regard to KPop Demon Hunters, pundits also point out that this particular animation was able to create something that anyone Korean would recognize, that anyone not Korean would still understand. Keeping this point in mind, Mariana, what are your thoughts on the direction of future K-content production for the global audience?
I think, as Jason said, the K-wave is here to stay, and it's raising its bar always on a next level. But I think also that the future of K-content is not about watering down the Korean identity. We saw that with KPop Demon Hunters. Korean identity is in full power there, and everyone loves that. But they have to make it fit in a global mold, like fitting like that, it would kill the magic, I think, of the K wave. So instead of watering it down, I think everything it's about fusion, keeping the essence of Korean, but weaving it into a universal narrative that everyone and anyone and everywhere can connect with, because Korean recognizes their myth, their stories, their symbol, their humor, and now the global audience does that as well, because everyone is studying, everyone is very curious of what they see and wants to know more. So I think that the global audiences love the struggle, the resilience, everything that's connected, but they also love how the trend is like seeing the traditional Korean stuff. And everything is deeply Korean. KPop Demon Hunters is deeply Korean, but it's also unmistakably universal, and it's something entirely new, and that's the paradigm for new content, rooted in identity but with globally intuition. So I think that fusing the flavor of Korea with what the world craves, it's like the power of the Korean wave and what made KPop Demon Hunters like something so big right now.
Right, and staying with what Mariana has just said, Jason, critics are indeed crediting the success of KPop Demon Hunters to its creative team that largely comprises Korean Canadians, including, of course, the director Maggie Kang and Korean Americans. Jason, what do you believe are the broader implications of this reality?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting what's going on right now. I mean, KPop Demon Hunters is an American film. It was produced by Sony Pictures. It's obviously a Netflix title. And I talked about this last time, I think in a sense, for so long, Korea has beaten Hollywood at its own game. I mentioned The Host earlier, and that's like a Korean blockbuster, but Bong Joon-ho is able to turn things upside down and make a blockbuster that works for Korean audiences, but also works for audiences overseas. And so, Korea, the local market share for Korean films was 50% or more, in the 2010s, and I think that was, like I said, Korean filmmakers and the Korean film industry looking at Hollywood and doing it even better. Now, what we're seeing with Demon Hunters, KPop Demon Hunters, is Hollywood learning from Korea. So there's this really interesting dynamic where, they're trying to beat Korea at its own game. And you do have these really interesting filmmakers and creators in Hollywood, Korean Americans, Korean Canadians, and they're really proud of their Korean heritage. And they do bring a different sensibility to their films and shows. We saw that with Beef, we saw that with Minari as well. And it's not to say it's better, it's not to say it's worse, it's just different. And I think that's an interesting dynamic in and of itself. And so they're able to make content that's, rooted in Korean culture, but accessible for, international global audiences. Parasite, Squid Game, they're also very accessible, but they're in Korean. And so, it's just a different component, I suppose, of the K-pop, the Korean wave. And so, with KPop Demon Hunters, we're seeing a lot of interest in Korea, in K-pop. And so I don't think it's a bad thing at all, but I do think, it is an interesting example of how, Hollywood is learning from Korea. And it's true of K-pop as well. I mean, the K-pop music videos, we're seeing that being kind of echoed in music videos in the United States. K-pop is one of the most, popular music industries in the world, and so it's not surprising to see even the big industries from America learning from what Korea is doing.
Right. Mariana, as Jason mentioned earlier, the government has spoken, of course, of support, has also provided support for the industry itself so that it can further expand its presence on the global stage. That being said, President Lee Jae-myung himself has also spoken about the importance of measures to assist the advancement of K-content on the international stage. He was here at Arirang TV earlier today to join a panel discussion talking about the next chapter of the K-pop industry. That particular program will air right after our show. That being said, Mariana, what would you suggest as possible proposals to further advance K-pop or the K-content industry as a whole on the international stage?
South Korea isn't just like leading the wave, but it's creating the tide. So I think that protecting the roots must come first when it comes to Korean content, because if K contents get copied, created, or like watered down to the point that they lose their cultural DNA, what Korea is exporting is no longer Korean, but just, an imitation, and also a weird imitation. And I think that's the fastest way to kill this wave. This wave is changing and shaping the world right now. And so I think that South Korea must safeguard originality while pushing the collaboration that keeps the Korean identity strong but connect with other cultures. And also, I think that expansions as to move beyond the hobby hubs, like, for example, not just London, LA, or like Berlin or Paris or whatever, or New York, but for example, Europe has real growth zone. No, and for example, Spain, but also Italy, they're like very, very, very interesting countries, and Greece or whatever, the Saudi Arabia. These audiences are already hooked into K dramas, K beauty, idol tours, and they simply want to for the industry to invest, building bridges here and there and bring the Korean wave. So I think that protection and collaboration are two key roles, to push to the fusion and expand beyond the standards we know, K-pop and K-culture.
Right, and staying with adjacent, with regard to the industry itself, what needs to be done to deepen the root of the Korean wave and to broaden its presence on the global stage?
Well, big question. I think, looking at film, I think that I think it's good to look at the film industry. I mean, that's where my passion is, if I'm honest. But although I do love all the different areas of the K-content industry, I mean, it's struggling at the moment. Admissions are down this year, and it's really struggled to kind of recover to the pre-pandemic levels. Korea's box office is around 45% down compared to 2019. And so that's really worrying for the industry. And, film has been a big part of that. It seems like you've got the world of television or streaming or shows, and then you've got the world of film, and they've kind of merged. So you've got film directors kind of migrating over to Netflix. We've seen that with filmmakers like Han Dong-yeok with Squid Game, and Han Jin-hee with DP, and many others. And it's true for actors as well. Song Kang-ho is now acted in a Disney series, and Uncle Samshik, and so I think there needs to be attention paid on trying to get the film industry, at least, to try and recover, or at least get back to some kind of normalcy. And we're just seeing fewer releases. We're seeing fewer films, and investments drying up. And so my concern is that with a show like KPop Demon Hunters, a film like KPop Demon Hunters, which is, I think it's a great, it's great to see Korean Americans really passionate about culture and just bringing their wealth of creativity into a film, and it working in wondrous ways. But I think at the same time, there are issues with regards to the Korean film industry and financing and investment, and that's something that I think hopefully the government can hopefully support or look at going forward. There have been these coupons, these 4.5 million coupons, which were really popular, and over the summer, it was interesting to see what kind of films were doing well. The Omniscient Reader didn't, was a big blockbuster disaster, whereas My Daughter is a Zombie, or Zombie Dow, did quite well. And so I think that's an example of just, how the industry has kind of pivoted away from these big blockbusters to some of these kind of smaller budget films, which is a good thing. And so I think there needs to be some support for some medium-sized budget movies and try and get them off the ground and get them into cinemas. But yeah, I mean, I think just, looking at the wider kind of the K-content industry, I mean, with streamers, Netflix is obviously has a big presence. And so, I mean, there are concerns that Netflix is really driving the industry, but that is certainly true. And so you've got the local streamers as well, and they're having to produce, a lot of content to keep up with Netflix and also Disney Plus. These are obviously American companies, and so the industry has changed a little bit because I sometimes make that comparison to the UK, where the UK it's a very vibrant cultural industry, but it's heavily reliant on American financing. There is no studio system in the UK. Some of the big production companies here, get support, or they've been bought over by American studios. So Korea, in some ways, is moving in that direction, and I do wonder whether that's where the culture industry wants to be going ahead, or whether it wants to continue to be, self-reliant. So, movies financed by Korean studios, made by Korean directors. And so I think, going ahead, that'll be an interesting thing to look out for.
Right, and definitely something to think about. All right, Jason, as always, thank you so much for your insights today over in London.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And Mariana, as always, thank you so much for your insights from Milan.
Thank you, Sunny. I hope to see you soon in person.
Right, me too. Thank you both. Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Press Perspective. As I mentioned earlier, coming up right after this break is a special session on the future of K-pop in a panel session that includes President Lee Jae-myung. Thank you for watching.
Set the facts straight. Get Korea right. K-culture is sweeping the globe. K-pop, K-drama,